Everyone ignored him. The blind old man shaking in the snow, facing the wrong way, invisible to a city that had already forgotten his name. Everyone except her, a starving delivery girl who had 11 minutes to keep her job. She stopped anyway. Big mistake. Or was it? Because that blind man, he used to be famous. And this one act of kindness is about to destroy her life. Before saving it. Tell me where you're from and subscribe for the full story. The wind through Westbridge cut like wire, sharp enough to freeze your lungs mid-breath. Streetlights flickered over patches of black ice. Snow packed down to gray concrete under hurried feet. Diana Moore pedaled hard, shoulders hunched, her gloved fingers stiff on the handlebars of a rusted bike whose chain whined with every rotation. 15. Rail-thin. Tougher than anyone her age should have to be. She'd learned to keep moving. Deliveries paid by the drop, not by the hour. One more order before curfew. One more envelope of cash. One more day her mother wouldn't have to choose between pills and rent. She whispered to herself. Just one more stop, trying to silence the gnaw of hunger in her stomach and the burn screaming through her thighs. Her phone buzzed. A text from her manager. One more delay and you're done. Last warning. She shoved it back into her coat pocket, jaw tightening. The air tasted like metal and chimney smoke. The kind of cold that made you feel like even God had looked away. At the intersection near the old bridge, her front tire slipped slightly over ice. That's when she saw him. An old man stood beside a snow-covered lamppost, coat too thin, white cane half buried at his feet, his body trembling as he faced the street instead of the sidewalk. His fingers clutched at nothing. His lips moved soundlessly, maybe calling for help, maybe praying. People streamed past him. Some glanced. Most didn't. He was invisible. Diana slowed, one foot dragging the pavement, watching him from 10 yards away. Nobody else stopped. Collars up. Eyes down. Too cold to care. She bit her lip hard. Don't stop. You can't stop. The clock on her phone read 7:52. The delivery had to be done by 8:15. Any later and she'd lose not just tonight's pay, but the entire week's rent money. She looked at the man again. His shoulders hunched like the world had forgotten he existed. His cane tipped, nearly falling. Her mother's voice flickered through her memory, soft and insistent. If you ever see someone alone like that, you stop, baby. Doesn't matter who they are. Diana squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her tongue hard against the roof of her mouth. Not tonight, she whispered. Please God, not tonight. She pushed down on the pedals. The bike lurched forward. But after 3 rotations of the wheel, her chest twisted. Heavy, sick with guilt. The image of the old man wouldn't leave her head. Those clouded eyes scanning emptiness. The way he stood so still, like he'd been standing there for hours and might stand there forever. She cursed under her breath, spun the bike around, and coasted back toward the lamppost. Sir, she called out, cautious but gentle. You okay? The man flinched, startled. His gaze, milky unfocused, turned vaguely toward her voice. I'm trying to find Maple and 7th, he said, voice cracking like dry leaves. But I can't remember which way. Up close, Diana saw how frail he was. Skin thin as tissue paper. Fingernails blue from cold. His white cane trembled in his grip. That's a long way from here, she said quietly, eyes flicking to her phone. 7:58, damn it. She could still make it. If she left now. Right now. But the man shivered violently, trying to rub warmth into his arms. Diana looked at his shoes, old leather, split at the toes, soaked through. The guilt hit again, sharper. All right, she sighed. Come on. Let's get you home. He hesitated, confused. You don't have to. Yeah, well, she said, kneeling to check her bike's back rack. Looks like I already am. She brushed snow off the seat and looked up. Can you sit here if I go slow? He frowned, uncertain. I don't want to be trouble. Too late, she said with a faint, tired grin. Trouble's kind of my specialty. He smiled, small, fragile. And for the first time that night, Diana felt something other than fear. She didn't realize then how much that smile would stay with her. As he struggled to climb onto the rack, her phone buzzed again. Where are you? She ignored it. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped her own scarf and looped it carefully around his neck, tucking the ends under his chin. Hold on tight, she said. The old man looked at her, eyes glassy with something like gratitude. You remind me of. He started, but his voice disappeared into the cold. Diana didn't ask. She pushed off the curb, wheels crunching against packed snow, legs already burning as she pedaled into the biting wind. The delivery bag thumped against her hip, heavy with the order she wouldn't complete tonight. Behind her, the man hummed something faint, a melody with no words. Maybe a memory too worn to name. She clenched her jaw and kept pedaling, every push forward a war between reason and heart. You just ruined everything, her mind hissed. Maybe not, her heart whispered back. The road curved along the river, streetlights blinking in and out like dying stars. Each one they passed felt like a countdown. Her phone buzzed again. And again. She didn't look. She already knew what she'd lost. The man leaned closer, voice barely audible through chattering teeth. It's colder than it used to be. Yeah, Diana said, breath white in the dark. World's meaner too. He gave a soft, wheezing laugh. Not all of it. She glanced over her shoulder, saw the ghost of a smile, and for a moment the cold didn't feel so cruel. They passed the edge of town where pavement cracked into older, narrower roads half buried in snow. What's your name? She asked. Matthias, he said quietly. Matthias Houston. The name meant nothing to her. Not yet. I'm Diana. Thank you, Diana, he whispered. You didn't have to stop. I know, she said, and kept pedaling. When they finally reached Maple and 7th, Matthias's building was dark except for one dim bulb above the entrance. Diana helped him to the door, steadied him as he fumbled for his keys. He turned to her, blind eyes wet with something between sorrow and wonder. How can I repay you? You don't have to, she said, already backing toward her bike. He reached into his coat, pulled out a crumpled bill. She waved it off. Just get inside. Stay warm. She scribbled her first name on the back of a delivery receipt, Diana, and pressed it into his palm before he could argue. Then she was gone, pedaling back into the storm, the wind howling louder now, her phone silent and heavy in her pocket. She returned to her apartment building just after midnight. The lights were off. A note was taped to her door. Rent overdue. Locks changed. Belongings outside tomorrow. And on her phone, one final message from her manager glowed in the dark. You're done. Don't come back. The first pale light of morning found Diana curled on a concrete step behind the laundromat, her bike chained to a rusted drainpipe, her body shivering despite the weak warmth leaking from the building's exhaust vent. She hadn't slept, not really. Just closed her eyes and listened to the hum of industrial dryers spinning through the wall, trying to convince herself that the cold gnawing at her bones was temporary, that everything was temporary. Her phone had died sometime around 3 a.m. She didn't need it to know what waited for her. The eviction notice taped to her door had been clear enough. Belongings will be removed at 8 a.m. Locks changed. No exceptions. She checked her watch, 7:43. She had 17 minutes before what little she owned would be sitting on the curb like trash. Diana stood, knees stiff, and wheeled her bike toward the apartment building 3 blocks away. Her fingers were numb inside her gloves. Her stomach felt like it had been scraped hollow. She turned the corner onto Bleecker Street and stopped cold. Her things were already outside. A single black garbage bag. A cardboard box with the flaps torn. A thin blanket she'd had since she was 10, now soaked through with melted snow. That was it. 15 years of life reduced to a pile that wouldn't fill a closet. Diana stared, throat tightening, eyes burning. She wouldn't cry. She'd learned a long time ago that tears didn't fix anything. She knelt beside the box and pulled out the one thing that mattered, a framed photo of her mother. Taken years ago, before the sickness, before the exhaustion carved lines into her face. Her mother smiled in the picture, holding a young Diana on her lap at an old upright piano. Diana traced her finger along the edge of the frame, remembering the sound of those lessons. Her mother's patient voice guiding her hands across the keys, teaching her that music was a language for feelings too big for words. The lessons had stopped when the hospital bills started. The piano had been sold 2 years later. Her mother never said it out loud, but Diana knew. Survival didn't leave room for beauty. You can't leave that here. A sharp voice cut through the cold. Diana looked up. The landlady stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face hard as stone. I got new tenants moving in this afternoon. Trash pickup is Thursday. Diana's jaw tightened. She wanted to scream. Wanted to throw the box at the woman's feet and demand to know how someone could be so cold. But she didn't. She just nodded, shoved the photo into her coat, grabbed the garbage bag and box, and balanced them awkwardly on her bike. The blanket she left. It was ruined anyway. She pedaled away without looking back, her breath coming in short, angry bursts. The bag kept slipping. The box dug into her ribs. Her legs screamed with every push of the pedals. But she didn't stop until she reached the alley behind the laundromat again. She dropped everything beside the exhaust vent, slumped down against the brick wall, and pressed her palms against her eyes. "I'd do it again," she whispered to no one. Her voice cracked. "I'd do it again." The memory came unbidden. Her mother's voice from years ago, soft but firm, after Diana had given her lunch money to a kid whose parents forgot to pack him anything. "You did good, baby." Sometimes doing good costs something, but it's still good. Her mother had made her a peanut butter sandwich that day, even though they were low on groceries. Diana had eaten half and saved the rest, just in case. She wiped her face with the back of her glove and stood. Sitting here wouldn't change anything. She needed warmth. She needed to think. The corner store on 5th was the closest. A small, cramped place that smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Diana pushed through the door, and a bell chimed overhead. The heat hit her immediately, dry, stale, but merciful. She exhaled, feeling her fingers start to thaw. The clerk behind the counter looked up. Middle-aged man, thinning hair, suspicious eyes that followed her like she'd already done something wrong. Diana kept her head down, moving slowly toward the back where a single-space heater glowed near the beverage coolers. She stood there, hands outstretched, letting the warmth soak into her skin. Her stomach growled, loud, embarrassing. She glanced toward the shelves. Rows of candy bars. Packaged sandwiches. Chips. Her mouth watered. She had 83 cents in her pocket. Not enough for anything. The clerk's eyes never left her. She could feel his stare like a weight pressing against her back. She turned away from the food, moved to a shelf near the window, and started straightening the cans, soup, beans, vegetables, lining them up with their labels facing forward. It was something. A small thank you for letting her stand inside. "You gonna buy something or just loiter?" The clerk's voice was flat, edged with accusation. Diana's hands froze on a can of tomato soup. She looked over her shoulder. "Just warming up. I'll leave." "Yeah, you do that." She walked toward the door, cheeks burning, shame twisting in her gut. As she reached for the handle, the clerk called out, "Next time you come in here, you better have money. I'm watching you." Diana didn't respond. She stepped outside, the cold hitting her like a slap, and climbed back onto her bike. Her hands shook. Not from the temperature this time, but from anger. From exhaustion. From the slow, crushing weight of a world that punished kindness and rewarded suspicion. She pedaled aimlessly, no destination in mind, just moving because staying still hurt worse. She found herself near the old bridge again, the place where she'd seen Matthias last night. The lamppost stood empty now, the snow around it trampled and gray. She stopped, one foot on the curb, staring at the spot where he'd been standing. The wind picked up, sharp and biting, and somewhere in its howl she thought she heard something else, a faint hum. A melody. The same one Matthias had hummed last night on the back of her bike. Diana closed her eyes, listening, letting the sound fill the hollow space inside her chest. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. She didn't believe it, but she said it anyway. She opened her eyes and started to push off the curb, then froze. A black sedan rolled to a stop beside her. Sleek. Expensive. The kind of car that didn't belong in this part of town. The engine idled, a low purr that cut through the wind. Diana's heart kicked into her throat. She gripped her handlebars tighter, ready to bolt. The back door opened. A man stepped out, tall, mid-40s, wearing a dark wool coat and polished shoes that reflected the gray sky. His face was calm, unreadable. He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Are you Diana Moore?" Her breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She stared at him, pulse hammering in her ears, and managed a single word. "Who's asking?" Diana's fingers tightened on the handlebars. Her eyes darted between the man and the open car door, calculating distance, escape routes, the seconds it would take to pedal away. "Who's asking?" she repeated, voice steadier than she felt. The man didn't move closer. He simply reached into his coat pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it up so she could see. Even from 3 feet away, Diana recognized it. The delivery receipt. Her name scribbled in her own handwriting across the back. "My name is Charles," the man said quietly. "I work for Mr. Matthias Houston. He asked me to find you." Diana's breath hitched. Why? He said you saved his life last night. Charles's expression softened, just slightly. He'd like to thank you properly. If you're willing. She stared at him, heart still pounding, suspicion warring with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Hope. I don't need thanks. He needed help. I know. Charles nodded toward the open car door. He knows too. But he'd still like to see you. Just for a few minutes. I can bring you back here after, or anywhere else you need to go. Diana looked down at her bike, at the garbage bag tied to the back rack, at her own reflection in the car's tinted window. Thin, exhausted, homeless. She had nothing to lose. Not anymore. Okay, she said finally. But my bike comes too. Charles smiled, the first real warmth she'd seen from him. Of course. He opened the trunk. Together they lifted the bike inside, and Diana climbed into the back seat, clutching her coat around her like armor. The car was warm. Too warm. She pressed her hands against the leather seat and tried not to think about how long it had been since she'd felt heat like this. They drove in silence through streets that grew quieter, older, until Charles pulled up in front of a narrow brick building tucked between a bookstore and a shuttered cafe. He opened her door, gestured toward the entrance. 3rd floor. Apartment 3C. Diana climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy, her stomach knotted with nerves. The hallway smelled like lemon oil and old wood. She found the door, 3C, brass numbers worn smooth with age, and knocked. Footsteps. Slow, careful. The door opened, and there he was. Matthias Houston stood in the doorway, his white cane in one hand, his blind eyes aimed somewhere just past her shoulder. But when he heard her breathe, his whole face softened. Diana. His voice was warm, cautious, hopeful. Yeah, she said quietly. It's me. He smiled, that same fragile smile from last night, and stepped back. Please, come in. The apartment was small but immaculate. Hardwood floors polished to a dull shine. Walls lined with bookshelves and framed photographs, their glass catching the pale winter light from a single window. And everywhere, instruments. A violin resting on a side table. A trumpet gleaming in its case. An upright piano against the far wall, its surface crowded with stacks of yellowed sheet music. Diana stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. Matthias moved carefully through the space, his cane tapping a familiar rhythm, his free hand trailing along the edge of a chair, the corner of the piano. He knew every inch of this place. He didn't need sight. He had memory. I wanted to thank you, he said, turning toward her voice. What you did last night. He paused, swallowed hard. Most people don't stop. Not anymore. Diana shifted her weight, uncomfortable with the gratitude. You needed help. That's all. No. Matthias shook his head slowly. It's not all. You gave up something important to help a stranger. Charles told me. You lost your job. Your home. His voice cracked. Because of me. Diana looked away, throat tight. She didn't want pity. She didn't want him to feel guilty. That's not your fault. Maybe not. He tilted his head, listening to the space between her words. But I'd like to do something about it. If you'll let me. Before she could answer, he moved toward the piano, his fingers brushing across its surface until they found a particular stack of papers. He lifted them carefully. I was a pianist once, he said softly. A long time ago. Before the accident. Diana watched him, seeing the way his hands trembled slightly, the way his jaw tightened against some old pain. My wife and I were driving home from a concert. Late. Icy roads. He paused, breathing slow and deliberate. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. They told me she was gone, that I'd never see again. He set the papers down, his palm resting flat against the piano's wood. The music stopped that night. I thought it was gone forever, that I was gone. Diana took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. Matthias smiled, sad but genuine. So am I. But last night, when you took my hand, when you spoke to me like I mattered, something woke up. Something I thought I'd buried. He turned toward her fully now, his blind eyes glistening. I need help, Diana. These scores. He gestured toward the stacks of sheet music. I can't read them anymore. And these letters. He pointed to a shoebox overflowing with envelopes. I don't even know what they say. I've been too afraid to ask anyone. Diana looked around the room, at the instruments gathering dust, at the life frozen in time. What do you need me to do? Organize the music. Read the letters aloud. Just be here a few evenings a week. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded check, held it out toward where he thought she stood. I'll pay you. Not much, but enough. It's work, Diana. Not charity. She stared at the check, her heart pounding. She didn't want to take it. Didn't want to feel like she was being bought. But the memory of last night's cold, this morning's eviction, the clerk's suspicious stare. All of it pressed down on her like a weight she couldn't carry alone. Okay, she said, taking the check. Her fingers brushed his, and he flinched slightly, then smiled. I'll help you. Matthias exhaled, relief washing over his face. Thank you. He turned back toward the piano, his hand resting on the fallboard. There's one more thing. Just one. And then you can leave if you want. Diana waited. Will you play something? Just the opening notes. Anything you remember. Her chest tightened. I haven't played in years. I know, he said gently. But your mother taught you. You told me last night. Diana's eyes burned. She hadn't meant to say that. Hadn't meant to reveal anything. But the cold and exhaustion had stripped her down to honesty. She stepped toward the piano, lifted the fallboard, stared down at the keys. Ivory yellowed with age, some chipped, all of them waiting. Her fingers hovered, trembling. Then slowly she pressed down. A single note. Then another. A simple melody. Something her mother had taught her when she was 8. The sound filled the room, clear and fragile, and Matthias's face transformed. His head tilted upward, toward the ceiling, toward something invisible. Tears slipped from his blind eyes and traced down his weathered cheeks. Yes, he whispered. Just like that. Diana played 3 more notes, then stopped, her hands shaking too hard to continue. She stood, stepped back, wrapped her arms around herself. Matthias didn't move. He just stood there, listening to the silence the music left behind. Thank you, he said again, his voice raw. Diana nodded, though he couldn't see it. I should go. Of course. Charles will take you wherever you need. She moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back at the stacks of sheet music. One of the piles had shifted when Matthias lifted the papers earlier. Something had slipped free, a photograph, old and faded, lying face up on the floor. Diana knelt, picked it up. Her breath stopped. The photo showed Matthias, younger, sighted, standing beside a full orchestra on a bright stage. He was smiling. And beside him, holding drumsticks, grinning wide, was a young man. Late 20s, maybe. Dark skin. Kind eyes. Diana turned the photo over. Written in careful script on the back. Matthias Houston and Trevor Moore, Chicago Symphony Hall, 1989. Moore. Her fingers went numb. The photo slipped from her hand and fell, spinning once before landing face up again. She stared at the name. At the young man's face. At the way his smile looked so much like the one in the photo her mother kept on the mantel. The photo of the father Diana had never known. Diana. Matthias's voice pulled her back. Are you all right? She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. She just picked up the photo with shaking hands and whispered, Who is Trevor Moore? Diana's voice came out strangled, barely more than breath. Who is Trevor Moore? Matthias froze. His hand tightened on his cane, knuckles going white. For a long moment he said nothing, just stood there with his blind eyes aimed at the floor, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate rhythm. Where did you hear that name? His voice was careful, controlled. The kind of control that came from holding back something enormous. Diana held up the photograph with shaking hands, then remembered he couldn't see it. There's a picture. On the floor. You're standing with someone, a percussionist. The back says Trevor Moore, 1989. Matthias's face went pale. He lowered himself slowly onto the piano bench, his cane clattering to the floor. Trevor, he whispered. My God, I haven't spoken that name in. He stopped, pressed his palm against his forehead. How old are you, Diana? 15. He was quiet for a long time. Then, Trevor Moore was one of the most talented musicians I ever worked with. Young, brilliant. He had this way of making rhythm feel like conversation. Every strike meant something. Matthias's voice softened, filled with old affection. He auditioned for my youth ensemble when he was 26. I took him on immediately. We worked together for 2 years. He was supposed to go on tour with us to Europe in '91. Diana's throat closed. She could barely force the words out. What happened to him? I don't know. Matthias shook his head slowly. 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, he just disappeared. Stopped coming to rehearsals. Stopped returning calls. I went to his apartment once, but the landlord said he'd moved out in the middle of the night. Left no forwarding address. He exhaled, the sound ragged. I thought maybe I'd pushed him too hard, or that he'd gotten a better offer somewhere else. I was angry at first, then worried. Then the accident happened and his voice broke. I lost everything. I never looked for him again. Diana stared at the photograph, at the young man's face, the curve of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. She'd seen those eyes in the mirror every day of her life. My father's name was Trevor Moore, she said quietly. He left before I was born. My mother never talks about him. But she has a photo, same year, same smile. Matthias's head snapped up. Your father? I never met him. Diana's hands trembled. Mom said he was a musician, that he had big dreams, that something happened and he just left. Her voice cracked. She wouldn't tell me what. Matthias sat motionless, his blind eyes wet. He had a daughter, he whispered. He never told me. But then again, I never asked about his life outside the music. I assumed. He stopped, pressed his palms against his face. Oh God, Trevor. Diana lowered herself onto the floor, legs giving out, still clutching the photograph. Why would he leave? I don't know. Matthias's voice was hollow. But I'm going to find out. I promise you, Diana. I'm going to find out. She nodded, unable to speak, and carefully set the photo on the piano. They sat in silence for a long time. Two people connected by a ghost neither of them had known they shared. Finally, Matthias cleared his throat. Come back tomorrow, he said quietly. Please. We'll go through everything, letters, old programs, contacts. If there's anything that explains where he went, we'll find it. Diana stood, her legs unsteady. Okay. Charles drove her back to the laundromat alley without asking questions. Diana spent the night curled against the warm exhaust vent, the photograph of her father and Matthias pressed against her chest, wondering what kind of man walked away from music, from a mentor, from a child he'd never meet. The next evening she returned, and the evening after that, and the one after that. The routine became a rhythm. Diana would arrive just after sunset, climb the stairs to 3C, and find Matthias waiting with stacks of letters, yellowed programs, old ledgers filled with names and dates. She read aloud while he listened, his face tilting toward her voice like a plant following sunlight. Most of the letters were from fans, old colleagues, students. Some were condolences from after the accident, painful, well-meaning words that Matthias flinched away from. But there was nothing about Trevor Moore. Between the reading, Matthias taught her. Not formally, not with lessons or structure, just moments. He'd tap a rhythm on the arm of his chair and ask her to echo it on the piano keys. She'd stumble at first, self-conscious, but he'd smile and say, again, trust your fingers. They remember more than your mind does. And they did. Slowly, hesitantly, the music came back. Simple melodies at first. Then harmonies. Then something that almost sounded like conversation. Her playing a phrase, him tapping a response against the piano bench with his cane, their rhythms weaving together like thread. One evening, as Diana finished reading a letter from a music teacher in Boston, Matthias leaned back in his chair and said, You have your father's sense of timing. That pause before the downbeat. That's pure Trevor. Diana's chest tightened. You really think so? I know so. He smiled. He used to drive me crazy with it. Always holding back just a fraction of a second. Making you wait, building tension. It was brilliant. She looked down at her hands. I wish I'd known him. So do I, Matthias said softly. But while Diana found something like peace in Matthias's apartment, the world outside was turning against her. It started small. A post on a neighborhood Facebook group. Saw that delivery girl hanging around 5th Street again. She was in the corner store acting suspicious. Didn't buy anything. Just standing there. Store owner should watch his inventory. The next day, another post. This one included a photo, grainy, taken through the store window, showing Diana standing near the space heater, her hand resting on a shelf. The caption read, Same girl. Still loitering. Probably casing the place. Then the rumor mutated. Someone recognized her bike outside Matthias's building. Another post appeared. Anyone know who this girl is? She's been visiting that blind old man on 3rd floor. Seems sketchy. Hope he's being careful. The replies came fast. Probably after his money. I heard she used to deliver food. Got fired for stealing. My cousin saw her sleeping behind the laundromat. She's definitely up to something. Poor old man probably doesn't even know he's being scammed. Diana didn't see the posts at first. Her phone was still dead, and she had no charger, no data plan, no way to check. But she felt the shift. People stared at her differently. The corner store clerk watched her through the window, even when she wasn't inside. A woman crossed the street to avoid passing her on the sidewalk. Then Matthias's landlord knocked on the door. Diana was reading aloud from a 1987 program when the knock came, sharp, impatient. Matthias frowned, called out, "Come in." The landlord stepped inside, a short, stocky man with thinning hair and a clipboard tucked under his arm. His eyes landed on Diana immediately, and his expression soured. "Mr. Houston," he said, his tone clipped. "I need to speak with you. Privately. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of Diana," Matthias replied calmly. The landlord's jaw tightened. "Fine. I've been getting complaints. About," he gestured vaguely toward Diana. "Your visitor. People are concerned." Diana's stomach dropped. "Concerned about what?" "About whether Mr. Houston is safe," the landlord said bluntly. "About whether you're taking advantage of a vulnerable elderly man." Matthias stood, his cane striking the floor hard. "That's absurd." "Maybe so. But the other tenants don't think so. And frankly, Mr. Houston, having her here is bad for the building." The landlord glanced at Diana, his expression cold. "People are posting about it online. Taking pictures. It's drawing attention we don't need." Diana's face burned. She stood, hands curling into fists. "I'm helping him. That's all. I'm sure that's what you tell yourself." The landlord's voice dripped with condescension. "But perception matters. And right now the perception is that you're..." "Enough." Matthias's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Diana is my guest. She will continue to be my guest. If the other tenants have a problem with that, they can speak to me directly." The landlord's mouth thinned into a hard line. "I'm just trying to protect you, Mr. Houston. I don't need protection from her." Matthias turned his head toward where Diana stood, his blind eyes fierce. "I need protection from people like you, people who see kindness and assume it's a con." The landlord said nothing for a moment, then shook his head. "Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Diana exhaled, her whole body trembling. "I should go." "No." Matthias's voice was firm. "You shouldn't. Don't let them win, Diana. Don't let them make you ashamed of doing the right thing." But shame wasn't the only thing she felt. Fear coiled in her gut. Fear that the rumors would grow, that they'd reach her mother, that somehow this fragile new stability would collapse just like everything else. She stayed another hour, reading mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When she finally left, the sky was dark and the streets were quiet. She descended the stairs slowly, her thoughts a tangled mess of anger and exhaustion. She pushed through the building's front door and froze. Two teenagers stood on the sidewalk, phones raised, recording. One of them grinned, sharp and cruel. "There she is," he called out, loud enough for his video to pick up. "Hey, how much is the blind man paying you?" The other one laughed. "Bet she's got his bank account already. Classic scam." Diana's heart hammered. She kept her head down, moved toward her bike chained to the railing. "What's wrong? Can't answer? Or are you too busy counting his money?" She unlocked her bike with shaking hands, climbed on, pushed off. "Thief!" one of them shouted after her. Their laughter followed her down the street, sharp and echoing, and somewhere behind her a phone notification chimed. Another post going live, another lie spreading faster than truth ever could. Diana pedaled hard, tears streaming down her face, the world blurring into streaks of light and shadow. She didn't stop until she reached the alley behind the laundromat, where she collapsed against the brick wall, chest heaving, and whispered into the dark. "I didn't do anything wrong." But the world didn't care. That night, she checked on her mother. Sneaking into the boarding house through a side window, climbing the stairs to the cramped room where her mother slept. The coughing was worse. Deep, rattling coughs that shook her thin frame. Diana pressed her hand against her mother's forehead. Too warm. The medicine bottles on the nightstand were empty. Diana counted the cash in her pocket. $23. The stipend from Matthias helped, but it wasn't enough. Not for rent, not for medicine, not for the life her mother deserved. She kissed her mother's forehead and slipped back out into the night. The rumors were growing. The medicine was running out. And somewhere in the dark, phones kept recording, kept posting, kept twisting her kindness into something ugly. But she'd made a promise. To Matthias. To herself. To the ghost of a father she'd never known. She wouldn't stop. Not yet. Diana woke before sunrise, her back pressed against cold brick, frost coating the edges of her jacket. Her mother's cough echoed in her memory. That rattling, desperate sound that meant the medicine had run out days ago. She checked her pocket. $23. Not enough. Never enough. She needed warmth. She needed to think. She wheeled her bike toward 5th Street as the sky turned from black to bruised purple. The corner store's lights were already on. Diana hesitated at the door, remembering the clerk's stare, the way he'd watched her like she was already guilty of something. But the cold bit through her coat, and her fingers were numb. She pushed inside. The bell chimed. The clerk looked up from behind the counter. Same suspicious eyes, same tight mouth. But this time something else flickered across his face. Satisfaction. You, he said, voice loud enough to carry. I need to talk to you. Diana froze halfway to the space heater. About what? About the $60 missing from my register. The words hit like a punch. Diana's breath caught. What? Yesterday. After you left. The clerk stepped out from behind the counter, arms crossed. I counted the drawer. $60 short. He looked her up and down, his expression hard. And you were the only one in here acting strange. Hanging around. Not buying anything. I didn't take anything. Diana's voice shook. I didn't even go near the register. That's what they all say. The door chimed again. 2 people walked in. A woman in a business suit, a man in a construction vest. They stopped, sensing the tension, phones already half raised. I didn't steal from you, Diana said, louder now, desperation creeping into her voice. I swear. I was warming up. That's all. The clerk shook his head slowly. You've been in here 4 times this week. Never bought a thing. Just standing around, looking at the shelves, touching the merchandise. I was straightening the cans. I was trying to help, or casing the place. He turned to the other customers. This girl's been loitering for days. Now money's missing. You do the math. The woman lifted her phone. The man did the same. Diana's stomach twisted. She could see it happening. The cameras, the posts, the story spreading before she even left the building. Check your security footage, Diana said, her voice cracking. Please. Just check it. You'll see I didn't take anything. The clerk's expression shifted. Just for a second, something uncomfortable flickering behind his eyes. Already did. System glitched. Right around the time you were here. Diana's heart plummeted. That's convenient. That's how it is. He stepped closer. Look, I'm giving you a chance here. You give me back the $60, and we forget this happened. Otherwise, I call the cops. I don't have $60. Tears burned Diana's eyes. I didn't take anything. Why would I steal from you? I've never stolen anything in my life. Then where were you sleeping last night? The clerk's voice was cold. Behind the laundromat, right? You're homeless. Desperate. It makes sense. The woman filming spoke up, her voice dripping with false concern. Sweetie, if you need help, there are shelters. I don't need a shelter. I need people to believe me. Diana's voice broke. She looked around at the phones, at the faces watching her like she was a spectacle, and something inside her shattered. She turned and ran, shouldering past the woman, slamming through the door, the bell's chime mocking her as she stumbled into the freezing morning air. Behind her, voices rose. She didn't stop. She grabbed her bike and pedaled blindly, tears streaming down her face, the cold air cutting her lungs. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. The world hated her, punished her. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried to do right, it all turned to poison. She rode until her legs gave out, until she found herself at the old bridge again, the place where this nightmare began. She dropped her bike, sank to the curb, and pressed her palms against her eyes. I'm cursed, she whispered. I have to be cursed. Her phone, charged now from an outlet at Matthias's place, buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A text from Charles. Mr. Houston wants to see you. Says it's important. Diana almost didn't go. Almost kept writing until she disappeared like her father had. But something, exhaustion maybe, or the last shred of hope, made her turn toward 3rd Street. Matthias was waiting at the door when she arrived. His face was lined with worry. Charles told me what happened. I didn't steal anything. Diana's voice was flat dead. I know you didn't. Nobody else does. She slumped against the doorframe. They're posting about it. Taking videos. I'm the girl who scams blind men and steals from corner stores. That's who I am now. Matthias reached out, found her shoulder, squeezed gently. That's not who you are. And I'm going to prove it. How? I'm going to speak publicly. Tell people the truth about you. About us. Diana pulled away. No. You'll just get dragged down with me. They'll say I manipulated you, that you're too old or too blind to see what I'm really doing. Her voice cracked. I won't let you ruin your life for me. Diana. I mean it. She stepped back. I'm leaving. Tonight. I'll go somewhere else. Somewhere no one knows me. It's better this way. Matthias's jaw tightened. You're not leaving. Not like this. He turned, called out. Charles. The driver appeared from the kitchen. Sir. Contact the owner of that corner store. Not the clerk, the actual owner. Tell him I want to review the security footage personally. All of it, including the backup. Charles nodded. I'll make the call now. Diana stared. The backup. Most stores have redundant systems, Matthias said calmly. Cloud storage, secondary cameras. If there was a glitch, there's usually another angle. He turned toward her voice. We're not giving up. Not on you. Not on the truth. Tears slipped down Diana's cheeks. Why are you doing this? Because you took my hand when no one else would. His voice was fierce, gentle. Because you're Trevor's daughter. Because you're good, Diana. And I won't let them take that from you. That evening they played. Matthias sat at the piano bench, Diana beside him. He tapped his cane twice against the floor, a count in a rhythm, and she placed her hands on the keys. The melody came slowly at first, hesitant, like something thawing after a long freeze. Matthias listened, his head tilted, and then his fingers found the bench's edge, tapping counterpoint, soft, steady, weaving through her notes like thread through fabric. The music filled the apartment. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. Two people speaking in the only language that didn't need words, building something fragile and beautiful in the space between despair and hope. When the last note faded, Matthias smiled. That was frost turning to morning. Diana exhaled, the tightness in her chest loosening. What? The melody. That's what it sounded like. Cold becoming warm. Night becoming day. She looked at him, this blind man who saw more than anyone with eyes, and whispered, Thank you. He reached over, found her hand, held it. We're going to fix this. I promise. Diana wanted to believe him. But belief was a luxury she'd lost somewhere between the eviction notice and the corner store's accusations. That night, she slept on Matthias's couch. He insisted. Charles brought blankets. For the first time in weeks, Diana felt warm. She woke to the sound of a phone ringing. Dawn light filtered through the window, pale, hesitant. Matthias answered in the other room, his voice low and careful. Then, are you certain? Yes. Yes, send it to me. And thank you. Footsteps. Matthias appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. That was the store owner. He reviewed the backup footage. Diana sat up, heart hammering. And Matthias's face broke into a slow, fierce smile. He found something. Something you need to see. He paused, leaning heavily on his cane. And something the city needs to see too. Diana's hands shook as she stared at Matthias. What did he find? The backup camera caught a different angle. Matthias's voice was steady, but she could hear the anger beneath it. The clerk, he was the one who took the money. Slipped it into his own pocket when he thought no one was looking. Diana's breath left her in a rush. He framed me. Yes. Matthias moved closer, his cane tapping across the floor. The owner is furious. He's already fired the clerk. And he wants to release the footage publicly, to clear your name. Diana pressed her palms against her face. Relief crashed over her like a wave, but it was tangled with something else, rage, exhaustion. The bitter sting of knowing she'd been right all along, and no one had believed her. When? He's posting it now. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The clerk behind the counter, glancing toward the door where Diana stood by the heater. His hand sliding into the register. Bills folded quickly, slipped into his front pocket. Then later, after Diana left, his face twisted with calculation as he counted the drawer, eyes on the door, already planning his story. The store owner's caption was short, brutal. The girl was telling the truth. My former employee was not. I'm sorry, Diana. The comment section exploded. Oh my God. She was innocent the whole time. I shared that post calling her a thief. I feel sick. Everyone jumped on her without proof. This is disgusting. That clerk should be arrested. The apologies came slowly at first, then faster. Private messages. Public comments. People who'd filmed her, mocked her, posted about her. All suddenly backpedaling, claiming they'd never really believed it, or that they were just worried for the old man. Diana read them on Matthias's computer, Charles standing beside her, and felt nothing. Not relief. Not vindication. Just hollow, aching exhaustion. They'll forget again, she said quietly. Next week, someone else will be the villain. And they'll believe it just as fast. Matthias, sitting across the room, shook his head. Maybe. But this time you have proof. And people who will stand with you. 2 days later, a woman from the Westbridge Community Center called. Her voice was warm, nervous. Mr. Houston? My name is Grace Chin. I coordinate events for seniors in the area. We heard about you, about your music, and we'd love to invite you to play a short set. Nothing formal. Just us. People who remember you. Matthias was silent for a long moment. Then, I haven't performed in 15 years. I know, but we'd be honored if you'd consider it. He declined politely and hung up. Diana watched from the couch, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly as he set the phone down. You should do it, she said. I can't. Why not? Because I'm afraid. His voice was raw. Afraid I've forgotten how. Afraid people will see how broken I am. Diana stood, crossed the room, knelt in front of him. You're not broken. You're just waiting. Let me be your eyes, Matthias. Just this once. He tilted his head toward her, his blind eyes wet. You'd really do that? You took my hand when I needed it, she said softly. Let me take yours. He called Grace back that night. The community center was small. A converted church hall with folding chairs and a battered upright piano shoved against the back wall. 40 people sat waiting, most of them elderly, some with walkers, some with oxygen tanks. All of them watching with the kind of quiet hope that came from remembering something beautiful from long ago. Diana guided Matthias to the piano, her hand light on his elbow. He moved carefully, his cane tapping, and when his fingers found the bench he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. Grace stood at the front, smiling. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matthias Houston and his accompanist Diana Moore. Scattered applause. Matthias sat. Diana stood beside him, heart hammering. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. Matthias's hand found hers, squeezed. You take the first number. Just the melody. I'll follow. What if I mess up? Then we mess up together. He smiled. Now sit. Diana sat. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. The room was silent. Waiting. 40 pairs of eyes on her. This girl who'd been called a thief, a scammer, a curse. She wanted to run. Wanted to disappear. But Matthias's shoulder pressed against hers, steady and warm, and she thought of her mother's voice. Sometimes doing good costs something. But it's still good. She pressed down. The first note rang out. Clear, fragile. Then another. A simple melody. Something her mother had taught her years ago. Her fingers moved slowly, cautiously, remembering the shape of the music even as her mind screamed that she wasn't good enough, that everyone was judging her, that this was a mistake. But then Matthias entered. His left hand found the keys, chords rolling in beneath her melody like sunlight breaking through clouds. Rich, warm, alive. He didn't need to see. He felt the rhythm of her playing, matched it, wove through it, turned her fragile notes into something greater. Diana's eyes burned. She kept playing, her right hand dancing over the melody while his left built a foundation beneath her. They moved together, call and response, question and answer, two voices speaking in the only language that mattered. When the final chord faded, the room was silent. Then someone in the back row started crying. Applause erupted. Not polite, not obligatory, but real. Raw. A standing ovation from people who remembered what it felt like to witness something true. Diana stood, legs shaking, and helped Matthias to his feet. He was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd met him. Grace approached, tears streaming down her face. That was, I don't have words. Thank you. An older man in the front row reached for Matthias's hand. I saw you play in '88. Chicago. You were magnificent then. You're magnificent now. Matthias gripped his hand, voice thick. Thank you for remembering. They left an hour later, after handshakes and hugs and promises to return. Charles drove them home through streets that felt different somehow. Softer, kinder. Diana stared out the window, exhausted and exhilarated, and thought maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't entirely cruel. That night, a local blogger posted a short video of the performance. The caption read, "Blind pianist and homeless teen save each other with one song. This is what hope looks like." By morning, it had 12,000 shares. The donations started arriving at the community center by noon. Anonymous, relentless. Money for Diana's mother's medicine. Money for rent. Money to replace the bike whose chain was finally giving out. Grace called, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to do with all this. It just keeps coming." Diana sat on Matthias's couch, staring at her phone, unable to process it. "People are helping. People are seeing you," Matthias said quietly. Finally, for 2 days, the world felt possible again. Diana bought her mother's medicine, paid a week's rent at the boarding house, fixed her bike. Matthias played every evening, teaching her new melodies, new rhythms, building something neither of them had thought they'd find again: joy. Then, on the third morning, Charles answered the phone. His expression darkened. He covered the receiver, looked at Matthias. "It's Channel 7 News. They want to schedule an interview." Matthias straightened. "About the performance?" "Not exactly." Charles's voice was careful. "They're calling it an investigative segment." "About?" He glanced at Diana. "Inappropriate influence over a vulnerable elder." Diana's stomach dropped. The room tilted. Matthias's jaw tightened. "Tell them." "They're already promoting it," Charles interrupted quietly. "It airs tomorrow night, whether you participate or not." Diana stood, her whole body cold. "They're going to twist it. They're going to make it look like I'm using you." "Let them try." Matthias's voice was steel. "We'll tell them the truth." But Diana had learned by now. The truth didn't matter when the lie was more interesting. And tomorrow night, the city would be watching. The studio lights were too bright, too hot. Diana sat in a stiff chair on a raised platform, her hands gripping her knees, trying to remember how to breathe. Matthias sat beside her, his white cane resting against his leg, his posture straight despite the nerves she knew he felt. Behind them, a live audience murmured. 200 people watching, judging, waiting for the spectacle. The host, Miranda Wells, smiled from across the desk. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Professional. Predatory. "We'll go live in 30 seconds, a producer called out. Diana's stomach twisted. She glanced at the monitor mounted on the wall. The promo graphic glowed on screen. Charity or con. The troubling story of a homeless teen and the blind man who took her in. Her face and Matthias's side by side, split down the middle like they were on trial. "This is a mistake," Diana whispered. Matthias found her hand squeezed. "No, it's a chance. Trust me." 10 seconds. Miranda straightened her notes, checked her makeup in a compact mirror, snapped it shut. 5, 4, 3. The red light blinked on. "Good evening. I'm Miranda Wells, and tonight we're investigating a story that's captivated and divided our city." Her voice was smooth, concerned. A 15-year-old girl. A blind, elderly pianist. An unlikely friendship that some are calling inspiring, and others are calling suspicious. The screen behind her flashed images. Diana on her bike, Matthias at the piano, the viral video of their performance. Then darker images. The corner store accusation, screenshots of cruel comments, a headline reading "Vulnerable Elder Targeted." Diana's chest tightened. This was already going wrong. Joining me tonight are Diana Moore and Matthias Houston. Miranda turned toward them, her expression carefully neutral. "Thank you both for being here." "Thank you for having us," Matthias said calmly. Miranda's eyes flicked to Diana. "Diana, let's start with you. You're 15. Homeless. No stable income. Then you meet Mr. Houston, a man with a successful past, royalties, resources. Some people are wondering, why did you really stop that night?" Diana's mouth went dry. "Because he needed help. But you benefit from that help now, don't you?" Miranda leaned forward. "You've been staying at his apartment. He pays you to work for him. You've received donations, thousands of dollars, because of your connection to him." Diana's voice caught. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Miranda's tone sharpened. "Help us understand. Because from the outside, it looks like a very convenient arrangement." The audience murmured. Diana saw phones rise, recording. Her hands trembled. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, voice breaking. "I just wanted to help him get home. And now you're performing together, living together, managing his affairs." Miranda glanced at her notes. "Some might call that inappropriate." even exploitative. That's enough. Matthias's voice cut through the studio like a blade. He lifted his hand, not aggressive, just firm, and the room fell silent. Miranda blinked, surprised. Mr. Houston, I'm just asking the questions our viewers. Your viewers, Matthias interrupted, are being fed a lie. He turned his head toward the camera, his blind eyes facing the lens with eerie precision. And I won't sit here and let you twist the truth to sell advertising. The audience shifted, uncertain. Matthias continued, his voice steady and clear. On a night when the temperature was below freezing, I stood at a bus stop, lost and confused. I'm blind. I couldn't read the signs. I couldn't see which direction I faced. And dozens of people walked past me, looked at me, kept walking. Diana watched him, tears burning her eyes. Diana Moore stopped. Matthias's hand found his cane, gripped it. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know I had money or a past or anything that could benefit her. She just saw someone who needed help. And she gave up her job, her income, to make sure I got home safely. Miranda tried to interject. But Mr. Houston, I'm not finished. His voice was harder now. When I learned what her kindness cost her, I offered her work. Not charity. Work. Because she has value. Because she deserves dignity. And yes, I pay her. Because labor deserves compensation. He turned toward the audience. Is that exploitation? Or is it what any decent human being would do? Silence. Then slowly scattered applause. Matthias wasn't done. I also want to announce something tonight. He paused, letting the weight settle. I'm starting a fund. For blind musicians and disadvantaged youth. It will be seeded by my royalties and managed with full community oversight, transparent, accountable, open to scrutiny. His jaw tightened. So no one can twist it into something ugly. The applause grew louder. People stood. First 1, then 5, then 20. Miranda looked at her producer, panic flickering across her face. This wasn't the narrative she'd scripted. Matthias raised his voice over the applause. Diana Moore saved my life. Not metaphorically. Literally. She pulled me back from a darkness I'd been drowning in for 15 years. And if this city wants to punish her for that, if you want to make her a villain for showing compassion, then you've forgotten what it means to be human. The standing ovation was deafening now. Miranda tried to regain control, but her voice was lost in the noise. She gestured frantically for a commercial break. The red light blinked off. Diana turned to Matthias, tears streaming down her face. You didn't have to. Yes, he said firmly. I did. Miranda leaned across the desk, her smile gone. That wasn't what we discussed. No, Matthias said calmly. It was the truth. I suggest you get used to it. Charles appeared from backstage, his expression carefully neutral. We should go. Now. They left through the side exit, avoiding the crowd still applauding in the studio. The night air hit Diana like a shock, cold, clean, real. She exhaled, her breath fogging white. Is it over? She whispered. It's just beginning, Matthias said. But he was smiling. Charles guided them toward the car parked at the curb. Diana walked beside Matthias, her hand light on his elbow, her mind spinning. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe the truth would be enough this time. Then she saw him. An older man stood by a concrete pillar near the studio entrance. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Dark skin weathered by time. He wore a worn jacket, jeans, boots covered in road dust. In his hand, he turned over a small object, a drumstick keychain, wooden and faded. He was staring at her. Diana slowed. Something about his face, the shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw, made her chest tighten. The man stepped forward, hesitant, like he was approaching something fragile. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Diana. She stopped. Matthias felt her freeze, turned his head. What's wrong? The man's eyes filled with tears. The drumstick keychain trembled in his grip. I knew your father, he said quietly. Then softer, like a confession. I am your father. The world tilted. Diana couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The sound of traffic, of voices, of her own heartbeat. All of it vanished into static. The man who'd walked away before she was born stood 3 feet away, holding a piece of wood carved into the shape of the life he'd abandoned. And he was crying. Diana stared at the man, her father, and felt nothing. Not rage. Not relief. Just a vast, empty space where 15 years of questions had lived. You're lying, she whispered. I'm not. Trevor Moore's voice cracked. He took another step forward, then stopped, like he knew he didn't deserve to come closer. I saw you on the news. Your face. Your name. I knew. He pressed his fist against his mouth. I knew I had to come. Matthias's hand found Diana's shoulder. Trevor. Trevor's head snapped toward the voice. His eyes widened. Matthias? My God. Matthias Houston. It's been a long time, Matthias said quietly. 34 years. Trevor's voice was hollow. I thought you were dead. Everyone said after the accident. I survived. Matthias tilted his head. You didn't. The words hung in the cold air. Trevor flinched like he'd been struck. Diana found her voice. Why did you leave? Because I was terrified. Trevor looked at her, his eyes red. Your mother was pregnant. We had nothing. I was playing in small clubs, barely making rent. The orchestra offer. Europe, 2 years. It felt like the answer. I thought I'd go make money, come back and give you both a real life. He swallowed hard. But then Matthias disappeared. The tour fell apart. I couldn't find work. I started moving, city to city, gig to gig. And I kept telling myself I'd come back when I had something to show for it. When I was worth coming back to. So you never came back, Diana said flatly. No. Trevor's voice broke completely. I'm a coward. I know that. But I need you to know. I thought about you every single day. I wrote letters I never sent. I kept this. He held up the drumstick keychain. Because your mother gave it to me the night I told her I was leaving. She said, come back when you remember what matters. Tears streamed down his face. I never forgot. I just didn't know how to face what I'd done. Diana wanted to scream. Wanted to hit him. Wanted to collapse. But she just stood there, frozen, until Matthias spoke. Do you have anything for her? Anything real? Trevor nodded quickly, fumbling in his jacket. He pulled out a worn envelope, yellowed with age, the edges soft from handling. I kept this in a locker at the old Chicago Hall. When the building closed last year, they sent me my stuff. I'd forgotten it was even there. He held it out with shaking hands. It's from when you were born. I wrote down a lullaby I wanted to teach you someday. I never, his voice failed. I never got the chance. Diana stared at the envelope but didn't take it. Charles stepped forward, gently took it, and tucked it into his coat pocket. We should go, he said quietly. Diana turned away from her father without another word. Trevor called after her, voice desperate. Diana, please. She didn't look back. Matthias squeezed her shoulder once, then let Charles guide them to the car. As they pulled away from the curb, Diana watched through the window. Trevor stood by the pillar alone, still holding the drumstick keychain, his shoulders shaking. She felt nothing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay on Matthias's couch, staring at the ceiling, while the envelope sat on the coffee table like an accusation. Finally, at 3 a.m, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting careful and clear. At the top, for Diana, when she's ready. Below it, musical notation. A simple melody, gentle and sad. And at the bottom, in smaller letters. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to stay. But maybe this can say what I can't. Love, Dad. Diana's hands shook. She carried the paper to Matthias's room, knocked softly. Are you awake? Always, came the quiet reply. She entered. Matthias sat on the edge of his bed, his cane beside him. What is it? The lullaby. Can you? Her voice broke. Can you play it? Let me see it. She placed the paper in his hands. His fingers traced the edges, then moved to the notation itself, reading the raised dots of braille someone had added years ago in faint pencil marks along the staff lines. His lips moved silently, counting, remembering. Then he stood. Come. They moved to the piano. Matthias sat, his hands hovering over the keys. This is beautiful, he whispered. Your father had a gift. He played the opening notes, slow, tender, aching with loss. Diana closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. It was a lullaby that had never been sung, a promise that had never been kept, a love that had existed only in silence. When Matthias finished, he was crying. We'll call it Take My Hand. Why? Because that's what it says. In every note. Take my hand. I'm sorry. Take my hand. He turned toward her. We'll play it at the Foundation's first concert. For everyone who was lost and everyone who found their way back. The Seeing Heart Foundation formed within a week. Matthias donated his royalties. The community center offered space. Charles managed the logistics. Donations poured in, enough to fund lessons, cane training, scholarships for blind musicians and neighborhood kids who couldn't afford instruments. Grace recruited students. 5 blind teenagers learning piano, guitar, percussion. 10 neighborhood kids from families like Diana's. Together, they rehearsed in the church sanctuary on 7th Street, the only space big enough to hold them all. Diana taught the younger ones basic melodies. Matthias worked with the advanced students. Charles coordinated schedules. Grace organized everything else. For 2 weeks, the sanctuary filled with music every evening. Imperfect, joyful, alive. But the trolls came back. Online posts multiplied. Foundation is a money laundering scheme. Girl manipulated old man into funding her pet project. This will collapse in 6 months. Watch. The corner store clerk, fired bitter, gave an interview to a local tabloid. She's a con artist. Always was. This foundation is just her next scam. Then Matthias's landlord called. I'm canceling the church rental. Too much controversy. Bad for business. Diana sat in the sanctuary, staring at the piano, and felt the familiar weight of defeat pressing down. It's happening again. No. Grace stood at the front, arms crossed. Not this time. She pulled out her phone, started texting. I'm calling everyone. Every neighbor, every volunteer, every person who believes in this. Within an hour, 20 people arrived. Then 40. Then 60. They offered the Baptist church 2 blocks over. The Unitarian sanctuary. Someone's warehouse. A retired teacher's backyard if necessary. You're not doing this alone, Grace said firmly. Not anymore. The concert was scheduled for Saturday night. 7 o'clock. The backup venue, the Baptist church on Maple Street, was secured. Programs printed. Chairs arranged. By 6:30, every seat was filled, people standing in the back, crowding the doorways. Diana stood backstage with Matthias, both of them in simple black clothes. The blind students waited nearby, nervous and excited. The neighborhood kids tuned instruments. Grace peeked through the curtain. It's packed. They're ready. Matthias squeezed Diana's hand. Are you? I think so. Good. He smiled. Then let's show them what hope sounds like. 6:55. The lights dimmed. The crowd quieted. 7 o'clock. Diana stepped toward the stage entrance. And every light in the sanctuary went out. Total darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Someone's phone flashlight clicked on, then another, then a dozen, casting flickering shadows across the walls. What happened? Grace's voice cut through the confusion. A stagehand rushed over. Rolling blackout. Whole grids down. Could be hours before it's back. Diana's heart sank. She turned to Matthias, her voice desperate. We can't. Yes, Matthias said calmly. We can. He stepped onto the dark stage, his cane tapping, and raised his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a technical difficulty. A few nervous laughs. But we don't need electricity to make music. We never did. He moved toward where he knew the piano stood, found it by memory, sat down. His hands found the keys. And in the darkness, he began to play. The piano's opening notes cut through the darkness like a beam of light through water. Clear, pure, impossible to ignore. Matthias played slowly, deliberately, each phrase a statement. We are still here. We will not stop. Diana stood frozen backstage, her heart hammering. The audience had gone silent, listening. Then gradually she heard movement, the rustle of fabric, the soft click of phones being raised. One flashlight beam appeared in the aisle. Then another. Then 10, 20, 50. Tiny stars held by volunteers, audience members, strangers who refused to let the darkness win. They lined the aisles, the walls, the back of the sanctuary, creating a constellation of light that transformed the space into something almost sacred. Grace appeared beside Diana, her face illuminated by her phone. We're not stopping, she whispered. Get the students ready. Diana nodded, turned to the nervous teenagers waiting in the wings. 5 blind students, instruments in hand. 10 neighborhood kids, some barely able to read music. All of them terrified and brave. It's just like rehearsal, Diana said quietly. Except now people are listening. So let them hear who you really are. Matthias finished his opening piece. The applause was soft, reverent. He stood, turned toward where he knew the audience sat, and spoke into the darkness. My name is Matthias Houston. 15 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought music was something I'd lost forever, along with my sight and my wife and everything that made me who I was. His voice was steady, but Diana could hear the emotion beneath it. Then a 15-year-old girl stopped on a frozen street and took my hand. And suddenly, I remembered something I'd forgotten. We don't need lights to see. We just need each other. From somewhere in the back, someone started humming, low, resonant, a single sustained note. Then another voice joined. Then 5, 10. The choir members scattered throughout the audience, creating a drone that filled the sanctuary like breath. Matthias smiled. Let me introduce you to some people who understand that better than anyone. The first student, a 16-year-old blind girl named Maya, walked onto the stage with her white cane tapping a careful rhythm. She found the microphone by memory, turned toward the darkness, and played her violin. A simple folk melody, the kind passed down through generations, each note trembling but true. When she finished, the applause shook the walls. Next came Jamal, 13, partially sighted, who sat at a keyboard and played something he'd written himself, a melody about his grandmother, who'd raised him after his parents died. His fingers stumbled twice, but he kept going, and when he finished, he whispered into the mic, "This is for you, Nana," and someone in the third row sobbed. One by one, the students performed. Some played instruments. Some sang. 3 of them, all blind, performed a choreographed piece using their canes as percussion, tapping patterns that sounded like rain, like footsteps, like heartbeats building toward something bigger. Between performances, they told their stories. Small survivals. A girl who'd learned to navigate her school by counting doorways. A boy who'd memorized bus routes by the sound of the engines. A teenager who'd taught himself guitar by feeling the vibrations through the wood. The sanctuary had become something else now. Not a concert hall, but a testimony. A declaration that visibility wasn't about being seen. It was about refusing to disappear. Finally, Grace stepped to the microphone. For our closing piece, we'd like to invite Matthias Houston and Diana Moore to perform a new composition. It's called Take My Hand. The audience stirred. Diana's legs felt like water. She walked onto the stage, guided by the constellation of phone lights, and found Matthias waiting by the piano. He turned toward her voice. Ready? No. He smiled. Good. Neither am I. She sat. He stood beside her, his cane in one hand, the other resting lightly on the piano's edge. The sanctuary went quiet. So quiet Diana could hear her own heartbeat. The distant hum of someone's generator finally coughing to life in the parking lot. The soft whisper of snow beginning to fall outside. Matthias placed his hand over hers on the keys. His fingers were warm, steady. On my count, he whispered. 1, 2, 3, 4. Diana pressed down. The melody began, fragile at first, the lullaby her father had written 15 years ago for a daughter he'd never met. Simple notes, a child's song, but carried on waves of memory and loss and hope that refused to die. Matthias's hand guided hers through the first phrase, then lifted away. She continued alone, her fingers finding confidence with each measure. Then Matthias joined her, his left hand adding chords beneath her melody, his right tapping rhythm on the piano's frame, turning the instrument into both song and drum. The audience began to clap. Not applause, but rhythm. Steady, soft, a heartbeat that joined the music. The choir hummed again, weaving harmonies beneath the melody. The students in the wings added their voices, wordless, aching, beautiful. Diana's vision blurred. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop playing. Matthias leaned closer, his voice barely audible over the music. This is what it sounds like when the world decides to stop and listen. The melody built, no longer fragile, no longer tentative, but fearless. Diana's hands moved across the keys with a strength she didn't know she had. Matthias's rhythm grew more complex, intricate patterns that danced around her melody like light through leaves. And the audience, 200 people sitting in darkness, holding tiny lights, clapping in unison, became part of the song itself. The final chord rang out, sustained by the choir's voices, the audience's rhythm, the resonance of the piano strings. Diana held the notes until they faded into silence. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then the sanctuary erupted. People stood, cried, embraced strangers beside them. The phone lights swayed like candles in a vigil. Somewhere in the back, someone shouted, "Again! Play it again!" But Matthias just stood, turned toward the sound of the crowd, and bowed. Diana stood beside him, her hand finding his, and together they faced the darkness that had become light. Backstage, after the crowd finally dispersed, Grace pulled Diana aside. Her eyes were red. I just got off the phone with a donor. Anonymous. They've pledged enough to cover the foundation's first-year operating costs. Full funding. And, her voice broke, they're donating a permanent rehearsal space. They want to name it after someone. They asked who. Diana couldn't speak. I told them your mother's name, Grace said softly. The Eleanor Moore Music Center. Is that okay? Diana nodded, unable to form words. Grace hugged her, hard and long, then stepped back. You did this. You and Matthias. You gave people permission to hope again. An hour later, Diana and Matthias sat alone in the sanctuary. The generator hummed. Snow fell outside the stained glass windows. Thick, silent, transforming the street into something clean and new. Matthias's hands rested on the piano keys, not playing, just feeling. Your father's melody, he said quietly. It was perfect. He wasn't, Diana replied. No, but the song was. That's what he gave you. Not his presence, but his truth. Matthias turned toward her. Music doesn't lie, Diana. It can't. Whatever else he failed at, he loved you. The song proves it. Diana looked at their hands, his weathered and scarred, hers young and rough from cold and work. Old and young, black and white, broken and healing, together on the keys like a promise. What happens now? She asked. Now, Matthias smiled. Now we keep going. We teach. We build. We show people that kindness isn't weakness, and that seeing doesn't require sight. He paused, listening to the snow. And we remember that the world changes one hand at a time, one note at a time, one choice to stop when everyone else keeps walking. Diana rested her head on his shoulder. Outside, the snow fell steadily, not as a threat this time, not as something to survive, but as quiet percussion for a city that had finally decided to stop and see. And in the darkness, two people sat at a piano, their hands joined on the keys, playing nothing and everything at once. The sound of wheels through snow, the silence of a blind man waiting, the choice that cost everything and saved more. This was the song they'd been composing all along. And it was just beginning. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next. Click on the image or video showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.